So like I said at the end of the last video, each state, at the time of the Revolution, at the time of the American Revolution, each state ended up writing their own constitution. Now they all had the same fundamentals, but now all the states were going to come together and create the Constitution for all of the United States of America. So, kind of the popular, or kind of not the popular, but the common aspects of all these constitutions were: one, popular sovereignty, which means that the country, the government has supreme power within a given area. Limited government, which means that people have certain rights that can't be infringed upon by the government. Civil rights and liberties. A separation of powers into 3 branches. We talked about that in the videos for Chapter 1. And then each branch of the government has the ability to check the other ones. This is just an interesting fact I thought was interesting. This is how the Pledge of Allegiance has changed over the years. So, in 1892, the word "to" was added. In 1923, the word "the" and "of the United States" was added to the Pledge of Allegiance. Then it became, in 24, instead of the United States, it was the United States of America. And then in 1954, they put "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, there was a critical period in the United States where each state was its own country, and what they formed was a loose confederation of states. Okay, so they created something before the Constitution. The Constitution before the Constitution was called the Articles of Confederation. It was basically how each individual state agreed to work with one another. However, the Articles of Confederation failed because it was so weak. Because no central power had control over all the states, and so the states kind of fought and bickered with each other, which led to a new meeting called the Constitutional Convention. Now, at this Constitutional Convention, the writers, the framers of the Constitution, were generally young. The average age was 42. About half of them were in their 30s, but they were well educated. They were all experienced in politics. A lot of them fought in the Revolutionary War, and many of them were familiar with Enlightenment thinkers and different forms of government and kind of theories of government. So two plans end up getting proposed. The first plan is the Virginia Plan. It supported a government with 3 branches: the legislative with two bodies, okay, the House and the Senate, House of Representatives and a Senate. The executive branch, judicial, they had representative in both bodies. Here's the main part: representation in both bodies of the legislative branch was based on population, which meant that larger states had more power in the federal government. Larger states had more power. Virginia is a bigger state. They wanted the plan that gave more power to big states. So it gave more power to states based on population. Virginia plan, representation is based on population. Now the New Jersey plan, New Jersey is a smaller state. New Jersey supported, just like the Virginia plan, a government with 3 branches: a legislative, judicial, and executive. However, representation in the legislative branch was based on 2 people coming from each state. So all states, regardless of population, were represented equally. So New Jersey had just as much power as Virginia. That was the main difference. Okay? What ends up happening is the Connecticut Compromise. Here, the legislative branch, which ends up being Congress, is composed of two houses. One house, the Senate, okay, the Senate, everybody is represented equally. There are two representatives, two senators from each state. Now, the House of Representatives is based on population of each state. So Virginia has more votes in the House of Representatives than New Jersey. But Virginia and New Jersey have the exact same number of votes in the Senate. This arose a question, do slaves count towards population? Because some states in the South had much more people if you counted slaves. And the North, they had less people. So the Northerners didn't want to count slaves as people, and the Southerners wanted to count slaves as people because they wanted more votes. What resulted was the 3/5 compromise. This means that a slave would count for 3/5 of a person when counting population for a state. Population then determined how many votes they got in the House of Representatives. This also created a division between people. There were certain people who liked the Connecticut Compromise and the Constitution, and they wanted to ratify it, or they wanted to make it official. Then there were other people who were against it, and they wanted to stop it from going through. The Federalists were people who favored the federal government. They wanted a strong central government. They wanted the Constitution, and that was led by James Madison, who wrote the Constitution, and Alexander Hamilton. Opposed to them were the Anti-Federalists, who didn't want the Constitution ratified. They didn't want it to be made officially law. They wanted states to have more power, and they wanted more of a weaker central government. And they demanded a Bill of Rights. They wanted a Bill of Rights. They said there's no Bill of Rights. We have to have a Bill of Rights. It was led by Sam Adams and John Hancock. And so the Anti-Federalists eventually passed the Constitution when the Federalists agreed to have a Bill of Rights put in later on. So the Bill of Rights ended up getting added in 1791. But on September 13th, 1788, the U.S. Constitution was ratified. Then, March 4th, 1789, the new Congress was convened, they got together, and George Washington was elected the first president.